And it's against this backdrop, the perspective of a former major metropolitan Texas district attorney, a person who has accepted responsibility for the execution of a person who may have been innocent, a person who has walked the walk in death penalty cases, that I want to talk with you very briefly about the Reuben Cantu case. The Reuben Cantu case has become a centerpiece in the innocence debate in America today because it offers haunting lessons. Reuben Cantu had a terrific defense lawyer, he had a fair judge, and he had a good, ethical prosecutor and a jury that returned the only possible verdict based on the evidence that was presented. The prosecutor that I assigned to that case was one of the most honorable and ethical human beings that I have ever known. And when he stood before the jury and argued that Reuben Cantu was guilty of the crime that we charged him with, he was absolutely certain that that was true. A special commission, if this legislature will create it, might take a look at the Cantu case, and they might conclude that Reuben Cantu didn't receive just the fair trial that our system requires. It might conclude that Reuben Cantu received a perfect trial, and yet almost 25 years later we have reason to believe that Reuben Cantu may well have been innocent. And whether he was innocent or not, the thing that is clear is that the system failed him. And what went wrong is that, well, how can I say that the system failed in a case in which it's not clear that the defendant was innocent? That's the question, but the answer is simple, and the answer is that Texas prosecutors are entrusted with vast discretion in deciding whether and how to prosecute capital murder cases. I made an error in judgment by permitting Cantu to be prosecuted for capital murder based on the uncorroborated testimony of a single eyewitness. The fact that most prosecutors confronted with the same circumstances at that point in time would have made exactly the same decision provides me with little comfort today. My star witness, who had absolutely nothing to gain but trouble for doing so, has recanted his sworn trial testimony under circumstances that make his current position credible to many people today. A special commission might conclude that my mistake is easily remedied, that the simple answer is not to permit the death penalty in single eyewitness cases. And that would be a good decision, but it would ignore the fact that prosecutors acting entirely in good faith must make all sorts of judgments in murder cases. And because we are human, we make mistakes, even on our best days. When you add to that the undeniable fact, the reality, that judges, jurors, defense attorneys, and witnesses also make mistakes, and what you're left with is a system that is simply not competent to guarantee the protection of the innocent in all capital murder cases. What we've seen over and over again are situations in which witnesses who have absolutely nothing to gain by recanting sworn testimony nevertheless do so, and that's happened all over the country. We've seen junk science debunked. We've seen the exposure of terrible mistakes in our forensic laboratories, and finally we've seen misconduct and errors by key players in the system. You've undoubtedly heard the argument from death penalty supporters that there is no proof that an innocent person has ever been executed in the United States. Justice Scalia made that statement in his concurring opinion in Kansas versus Marsh. But the fact is that since 1976, 130 death row inmates have been factually exonerated. Factually exonerated. Nine of those people were from Texas. A special commission might disagree with Justice Scalia about whether an innocent person has ever been executed in Texas. And the only place where they would have to look, my friends, is to the state of Texas. They could look at the Cameron Willingham case, and I won't talk about it today, but I'll be happy to answer your questions about it. The Willingham case was a Corsicana case in which it is clear not only that an innocent man was executed by the state of Texas, but that an innocent person was executed for something that was not even a crime. And that occurred in your state, in my state. That commission might also look at the Carlos de Luna case, a case in which the defendant was almost certainly innocent. That case was tried in Corpus Christi. These cases are different from each other in material respects, but they all have one thing in common other than the fact that they all occurred in Texas. Whether Cantu, Willingham, and de Luna were innocent or not, each of their juries, had they known what we know today, would undoubtedly have returned a verdict of not guilty based on reasonable doubt. All three of those men have been executed. Some say it's good enough if we get it right most of the time, that the price for the only penalty that fits the most heinous crimes, the occasional wrongful execution, is not too high, that good intentions, strong procedural safeguards, and a fair trial provide sufficient protection. A special study commission might conclude that accepting a system that tries hard and gets it right most of the time, when the sanction is so final, breaks the most fundamental promise that we made to ourselves and each other when we agreed to give our government this awesome power that it exercises over us. What we seek today is not for the 346 people who reside on our death row. It's for the millions of law-abiding Texans who remember that promise, that the protection of the innocent will be guaranteed by our courts. Let us never forget that we will be judged forever not by how we treat the rich, the powerful, and the well-connected, but by how we treat the weakest among us, and by whether we kept that promise. For ourselves and our children, I hope that we will do everything that is within our power to ensure that the judgment of history will be that we passed that test, that when we were called on to keep the promise, that we didn't fail. This legislation will move the state of Texas in that direction. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer your questions.